have the Ballon d'Or in the background as well if you want it. Now I'm flexing. But hey.
Welcome back to Watches and, a podcast for people who like watches served with something else. In this case, it's watches and football. Although, as an Australian, I object, Your Honour. This should be watches and soccer. I'm not going to argue that case because I am resoundingly defeated every time I try. Watches and football is today's subject, and we have a very special guest, the first ever winner of the Ballon d'Or Feminine, Ada Hegerberg. Ada is a delightful interview. She is a Hublot fan. She has many watch stories to tell, and we have so many laughs along the way. Let's go.
I think I had something when I was younger, believing in myself. I was very fearless. I never put boundaries for myself, and I think that comes from my parents. So they gave me a lot of space and a voice to actually go on and do what I wanted to do.
Ada Hegerberg is in a difficult spot right now. We're doing this interview on Zoom. She's had trouble getting a microphone set up. She's just coming off the World Cup where she was injured at a critical time. But would you know any of these things are troubling Ada Hegerberg? You would not. This is a sunny, positive, just infectiously happy person. And the subject today is watches, which often is intimidating for people that speak to me because they feel that they're going to say something wrong or that their knowledge will be inadequate or that they're not into watches enough to be on a watch podcast. But none of that comes into the equation. This conversation takes in women's football, the rise of women's football. We both share anecdotes about the performance of the Matildas and her own journey in football leading to some moments where the sport has reached new levels of audience and acclaim, and also a very popular subject of Ada's, which is what needs to happen for women's football to be even closer aligned to men's and to be as popular. I have 3 daughters, which I mentioned through this many times because I know that sports stars like Ada are so inspirational to daughters like mine, and they can have this towering presence in life for young sports people looking up to a vision of how life could be if they dedicated themselves to their sport. And Ada is such a great sport. She's a very talented girl, and she gave everything in this discussion and really recapped the watches that are linked to the best moments in her career and also to the feeling, I suppose, of being inside the Hublot ambassador machine. What's it like being one of these towering figures that stands amongst, it's almost like a Madame Tussauds or a hall of fame of greatest sports people ever assembled under the big H of Hublot. It's a thrilling discussion. I hope you enjoy it and stick around till the end, and I'll catch you there. If you're listening and if you don't have the full history of Ada Hegerberg right at your disposal, I am looking at and you are hearing from the first ever Ballon d'Or Feminine winner.
Yeah.
And you keep it very conveniently just behind you on your Zoom screen.
I do. It's here in the talk with us. I won't say where it is because I always say that I hide it in a secret place, but obviously I'm at home, so it's not very secret anymore, is it?
It's just in front of your husband's view of the TV right now, so you've got it in a really good spot. Ada, thank you for coming on this podcast because this is quite, I imagine, a little bit dauntingly not just about football today, even though as an Australian I call it soccer, and I will always call it soccer, even though no one knows what I mean.
You're excused.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. But we are talking about not only watches, but also football and your incredible story in football. But before we get too deeply into that, can you tell me about you and watches? When did you become aware of them? Not just Hublot and the fact that you now are such a big part of the brand story, but what about you and watches in general? You've mentioned that your husband's a watch geek. Where do you stand?
Well, first of all, I got to say, with pure honesty that this partnership with Hublot is something that I'm extremely proud of, that I managed to achieve with my career. Since the beginning, I've really felt like it was this familiar relationship. I think Hublot is it's like a big family. And the fact that they went all into football, or soccer, whatever you call it, as one of the only watch brands, I would say, that really went all into football, especially women's football, is something very dear. And I'm very proud of this relationship because football brings you so much more than just football. And the opportunities I've gotten throughout my career, but getting these opportunities, being able to represent such a historical, powerful, I would say, watch brand means a lot to me. So I would say my watch interest just exploded going into this partnership, but I got a lot of help from my dear husband, who's a geek of himself, and he was as excited as I was when I got into Hublot.
I'm excited that he's wearing a Time+Tide t-shirt. There's a little bit of love going both ways.
Absolutely.
Let's jump into what's on your wrist because we want to get into details straight away. There's a lot of options with Hublot. There's skeletonized pieces, there's technical looking pieces, there's bling, there's rotating diamonds, there's just about anything you can imagine. What did you choose to express yourself and how many do you have? Because I asked Usain Bolt this question and he didn't know the answer. He said, well, I have some suitcases.
Oh, come on. I know my number. Don't worry about that. So first, I started very classic. I went all in for classic fusions and a lot of them in 33 millimeters. And I just found them so classical, so neat, very feminine. But then I'm a bling bling girl as well because I like some bling. And obviously I grew a lot with my collection. So I have a lot of classic fusions. I'm just wearing a one click at the moment, which is pretty cool.
This is white with a white strap. You can easily change the strap.
Very cool, very classic. Much of a summer watch, I would say, but I like to wear it all year long. I would say that one of my biggest babies, I would say, is classic fusion. That's a Rolls gold steel, very beautiful. It's a bit personalized, custom made, so very dear to me.
What were the touches you included on that?
I think it's a 38 millimeters, and I don't think they are on the market, if I'm right. Or are they?
The sizes are changing all the time, but it's quite. It would not surprise me if they made you a custom size. So you asked for something that's somewhere between a large and then the more feminine size, I suppose.
Yeah. I would like to tell the women out there as well, having a bigger watch on your wrist is actually a very nice thing. You know, we tend to go for something smaller that looks more feminine, but challenging yourself, getting something bigger is actually pretty cool. Because I was going to mention the last watch that's maybe my favorite, I gotta say. It's the Hublot Sapphire one, and I can't believe they got me one.
You have a sapphire?
Yeah, I'm forever grateful that I have a sapphire. It's such a beautiful piece, and I'm almost afraid of wearing it sometimes. It's just a beauty.
If we can talk about your husband briefly, why do you think watches are such a big love for men? Like, what is it about this hobby that is so addictive, in particular for men? I think it is gender free in that women can. There are many women that have become as addicted, but what do you think is it that makes it such a guy thing?
I do not mind talking about my husband. I do it all the time. He hates it, but thanks for asking. It's so stereotyped, isn't it, that watches should be a men thing. But it should definitely become a women's thing as well, because we love, first of all, jewelry. We love that extra detail. And I think watches is such a big statement piece of your style, of your outfits. And I think Hublot is a very good example because it starts to include women with their pieces more and more, I feel. You have the classic fusions, you can have a more sporty part. Even with the big bangs are awesome for women. I definitely think watches should be unisex, much more of a women thing as well.
I think it's starting to happen. But Ada, I want to ask you a question now about something that's starting to happen in football, which is, and I want to know what it's like from inside, because to me, from the outside of football, and someone that is not as into soccer or football as everyone else in London. I'm an Australian. We have a lot of our own sports. We have a very obsessed sporting culture. We are absolutely fanatical about anything that involves a ball. It's just part of our culture. But I feel that this year, something dramatic changed in the way that the world perceived women's football in particular. Did it feel like that to you? You are the first recipient of the Ballon d'Or Feminine in 2018. You have obviously been inside that zeitgeist in a way, the first person to really represent it. But did it feel like something changed this year? Because the pubs were full of people supporting the World Cup this year. Australia was so excited about Sam Kerr and what the Australian team did, the Lionesses in the UK. It was just crazy. The whole country was behind this in a way that I've never seen before.
That's the beauty of sport. That's the beauty of football, how we can gather a whole nation. And obviously, I'm Norwegian, and we had a very tough World Cup, so I wouldn't say I have the same experience from this
And you were
summer.
injured too, and it was a devastation.
Oh, man, it was a tough experience, but I guess that's sport as well. You can see how it opened people's minds, seeing these kick-ass women doing well, gathering a whole nation. I mean, people were jumping out from the seats in an airplane. I saw videos of rugby teams stopping their games just to watch the shootout they had, penalty shootout. And it doesn't come as a shock to me that people are more interested into the game, the women's game, because I think people start to see value in it. The game, how it's developed, the business possibilities. We've come a long way. Did it go as quickly that we wanted it to? Maybe not, but I think we've come a long way in terms of how people's attitudes are towards the women's game or women's football. I still think we need to change a lot of mentalities out there in order to grow the product and get it more professionalized. I really want to add something which is going to be important for the next years as well, is that I think the women's football needs to find its own identity, because obviously we look at the men's game and how they do, but we have to ask ourselves the good questions as well. Do we really want to do copy-paste with the men and create the same product as they do, or do we want to do something on our own? Mm-hmm. And I think these are the questions we need to ask ourselves before we take new decisions that are going to change the game even further.
You're quite right about Hublot supporting football so wholeheartedly when other brands had not, and also translating that to women. But I just particularly love this story about Hublot and its non-traditional sporting support. It went in for boxing when no one was in boxing. Who would have thought boxing would become the positioning it has now? Like, UFC is suddenly not a lower or middle class thing. It has crossed over to affluent society, as has boxing, as has cricket. There's been a huge support from Hublot for cricket as well as football. So a lot of these what might be working class sports, or certainly not the, Rolex supporting Wimbledon and, Longines supporting equestrian events. This Definitely. Was where Swiss brands were supporting sport. And then Hublot looks at this middle tier of sports and says, well, the middle tier has like 90% of the audience. We're going to go in hard for these sports. And I just love to mention that because it was actually for the Swiss, who are so conservative and they're so traditional in what is luxury and what is not luxury, that don't you think it was so ahead of its time, even NBA, the way that the early Hublot ambassadors were the absolute goats of NBA. So I think it must have been quite interesting for you to be offered the opportunity, and then you look at the existing ambassador lineup and go, wow.
Totally. And our main man, Ricardo, thinks outside the box. I think it's going to gain the whole Hublot brand for years to come. And being back in 2018 when Hublot reached out as well, it was a no-brainer to me to be able to represent their brand. I think they have such a big image. They only expand. And on a personal level, all the people that I've been working with within Hublot, obviously I had my injuries, for example. They were always there. They never doubted that I would come back. They always supported me. So on a personal level as well, Hublot has been brilliant. So going after a second Ballon d'Or, they will be at the first row, but definitely with the others, celebrating it.
And when you do look back on this opportunity as it came up, in your mind, who were the Hublot sports people that you recognised, and looking at that lineup at the time, because they really have supported some of the greatest ever football players as well as basketball players. But did you feel like you were joining a bit of an elite group when that chance came?
100%. I would obviously mention Usain Bolt being the biggest character, maybe. I mean, he's always been Hublot since a while. Obviously, being among those names and faces, it's a big thing. And also being a women's athlete and being able to represent Hublot worldwide is also a big thing to me, because I think it's good of them investing in the women's game and having women profiles as well.
Now, you mentioned that it needs to be done in a unique way. One thing that occurs to me at the moment, looking at Netflix, there's all of these series about these huge character players. You know, I don't need to say all the names, but there's Figaro, there's Messi, there's Beckham. And these series have just become absolutely epic in themselves. When I was walking home one evening when Beckham dropped, I was looking into people's front rooms as I was walking home. The whole nation was watching it. So it seems to me like part of the crazy cultural zeitgeist of football is these strong characters that have these interesting backstories and lives that we can't seem to get enough of. Do you think that will necessarily happen in women's football too? Because Sam Kerr is someone you just wouldn't mess with her. Like, you can already tell as an Aussie, this is a character who there's a lot we could learn from. I'm sure that there could be incredible backstory that we look into there, but
Totally.
it hasn't quite happened yet, has it? Why do you think that is?
It hasn't exploded yet. And I think the day we manage to put these women on front, I think there's some amazing stories that will be told. It's just a matter of time. It's all about also about marketing. It's about getting the sport more professionalized. And I think we need these icons or these role models, these female role models, to be put up there so that young girls, even young girls and young boys, can like look up to them and say, look at that. I mean, there are not only men succeeding in the world, but you also have these women, kick-ass women who are professional, who work hard to arrive at the place they are today. And I think you can have also different stories from the men's, different adversity, different stories in general, which is also important, I think, to show the next generation that, especially taking the women in the society today, what challenges does she confront? How does she deal with it? How did we manage to end up at the place we are? Because I can tell you that it's not only about being good at football. You also need to have a pretty hard mind to make it today. So I think the stories there are a lot of stories out there. It's just all about performing. We have to perform, and hopefully with time we can get those stories out there by brilliant performances and capturing people.
So let's brainstorm Ada's documentary now, because I think we definitely have legs here for a documentary.
She has a lovely husband. Husband.
I've heard about him already. No, but like, give me some of your key moments that would make it to the documentary. Your parents, your best ever goal, your best ever moments. Yeah. Give me a couple of them. Let's build a brainstorm here.
Well, I feel like the underlying story here has to be, how the hell did a Norwegian girl make it to the Ballon d'Or? First of all, I mean, it should not be possible. We're a country where people are educated to ski. I mean, we're a ski country nation. And I just think that I was very lucky with my parents. I mean, they've been great. They always gave me the space to be the person I am. I think I had something when I was younger, believing in myself. I was very fearless, and I never put boundaries for myself. And I think that comes from my parents. So they gave me a lot of space and a voice to actually go on and do what I wanted to do. And I think it starts by that, because obviously you don't go from a small town in Norway to Lyon, winning Champions League titles, winning a Ballon d'Or. I think there's a lot of steps in that story. I would say I was very lucky growing up. I had a great childhood. As I said, had great role models in my parents. They challenged us. But I would say that I've trained very hard to get to the point where I am today. And I think that's important to tell the next generation as well, that if you really, really want something, and if you really believe in yourself going there, it takes a lot of work. But it's very hard to not be able to put that work down if you're not passionate, if you don't have that fire, if you're not willing to maybe go too far sometimes. And that's what I did to get to the place I was today. And on that road, there's been a lot of adversity. Being a woman in a man's world, people try to push you down. I think that's the case being a woman or a man. We will all be challenged in some points. But by believing myself, knowing my values, knowing where I wanted to head, I always managed to kind of like face those challenges in some way. And I think that's so important to tell people as well. Like if you're very conscious about your values and where you want to head in life, I think we all are going to face hard, challenging periods, but it's possible to overcome them if you believe in yourself.
I saw a great clip by Michael Phelps this week where he talked about, people say, "Oh, what's the secret to your success?" And he says, and he says, it's easy. I can answer that. He said, I did 5 years with no days off. Not one. Have you seen this clip? It's an incredible clip. He just says,
those swimmers.
It's really easy. 5 days, 5 years, no days off. If you can do that, you'll go pretty far. No matter what you're doing, if you just don't take a day off. So that kind of just shattered this idea that there's anything magical. But
exactly.
I think it's good to do that every now and again. And it sounds like you had the same. And I just want to know, like, when people do feel unmotivated to stick with something, how did you get yourself up on those days? David Goggins talks about looking at his running shoes and just fighting with that.
Some days it's terrible.
It's so hard.
Terrible. I try to remind myself that I'm basically being paid doing what I love. But I would say the most challenging period of my life or in my career was doing my ACL. So I had a very serious knee injury back in 2020. But alongside that, I also have a stress fracture in my other leg. So I was kind of like, I had no legs at a point. And ACL went very well, the whole rehab. But coming back, I had so much pain in my tibia. And being a woman in sports, where there's zero research and there's zero competence to actually get helped and get the competence to heal this, I struggled for a good 2 years to get rid of this stress fracture, almost 3 years. And man, that was challenging because I came back from my ACL and stress fracture, winning the Champions League, flying, but I basically still had a hole in my tibia, which I didn't know at that point. So I was facing a lot of pain, which definitely, it was very hard mentally. In the end, I managed to find competence. I did 3 surgeries that didn't work. I finally figured out that a guy helped me with my hormones, helped me stabilize my hormones, and that's where I healed. So that was a very challenging period because I couldn't touch the ball for a very long time. But after that, I've been flying. So I'm definitely a different person after those experiences. I wish I lived without it, but it was also a crazy experience.
Now, let's dispel a myth, because obviously men, testosterone, competition, competitiveness, and look, in the Usain Bolt documentary, he very clearly says, I was struggling to find a reason to come back until Gatlin gave me a reason. This is his main nemesis, the American sprinter. And Gatlin was already celebrating what he would do with his gold medals when he won them, and happened to really trigger Bolt to find another will to win, because he'd been at the top for long enough to lose the fire. Are women as competitive? Can we put that to rest? Because I really think it's a myth that men are more competitive than women. That's surely not true.
Yeah, no, I think we're even worse than men at some points. You should have seen me play Monopoly with my family or with my husband. But I think that the champs of the champions is that they manage to stay at a high level for many, many years. And that's what inspired me as well. Like, how do you find like small pieces of motivation or inspiration year in and year out, even though you had a great year or a worse year? Those are the champs in my eyes, those who manage to stay at a high level throughout their whole career. And that's why I love the documentary of Michael Jordan as well. The Last Dance. I mean, the guy was literally recreating false scenarios in his head just to motivate himself. So he would like come up with stories that weren't even true about people criticizing him just to kind of motivate himself. And I love that. I think it's extreme. It's good that it's only for a period of our lives, because I think you can tend to become a bit crazy, but I still love that.
Yeah. So tell me, if we're going with this idea of a Beck's-style documentary, like obviously the whole series starts with this half-pitch goal that still is, you can just watch it all day. I've looked at your highlight reels, but I don't want to choose it. I want you to tell me what is going to be the first scene of you on pitch that we see in your documentary. What is the classic?
I would choose between two moments. It's that I scored a hat-trick in the Champions League final back in 2019, but I would even put the goal when I came back from 20 months of injury, scoring again and getting an assist in the 2022 final, because that was a completely different version of myself coming back from something serious. So maybe that first one first and that second one at a later point.
I think we're getting close to selling this documentary. There's a lot of good themes in this.
I'm glad you're really selling me in a good light here. Let's get this going in a couple of years.
I need a little bit more punchy though. I need, like, as you said, Michael Jordan he's revealed as kind of crazy in his intense, like in this, he needed to trigger himself to fight. What is you at your punchiest? Do you have a nemesis on pitch? Is there someone that fires you up in that way?
Mentioning my husband again, but he tends to tell me that I am some of the same. That when I think that everyone's against me, that's where I fire at all points. So I think like pressure is a good thing for me. I think the higher the stakes are, the better I perform. So ever since I was little, I was also creating a lot of scenarios in my head. I visualized a lot, scoring a lot, and getting all fired up. So I think that's been a part of me, that competitiveness since young. Yeah, always wanting to respond is something that fires me up. So that's maybe why I loved The Last Dance as much. Michael Jordan was a tough guy to deal for a lot of people. It costs a lot, but then he is maybe one of the best athletes we've had in history.
I think that the thing that stands out to me about that documentary is also the decadent side of him. I wasn't aware that he was quite prone to have a big night before a game. And I think one of his best ever performances came off the back of, I think he'd had like 11 beers and like it was just one of these amazing stories where he was able to live both lives, to, you know, because a lot of athletes now are just so in cotton wool and they have to live clean. I'm quite sure that you would say you are, but this is a different era.
I don't know how they did back in the days, honestly, when I heard about Maradona's lifestyle, obviously Michael Jordan had his share deal of cigars and lifestyle. I'm sure. I'm pretty sure he was professional to the core of his abilities. I think it's impossible to perform in and year out without being professional at that level, especially today. I think the game demands so much out of you. The level is getting higher and higher, especially physically. So it's hard to have a lifestyle that's not suited for the levels that exist today. So I would love to say that after a night out, I would be at my best, but I really don't think that's the case. I haven't put myself through that yet. I mean, you have to be on your toes at each week, each day.
Yeah. Now, tell me about these Hublots you have, because you said you've got a number. Are they tied to moments, to self-rewards, to are they have memories for you? And if so, what watches have the best memories?
So, you know the rose gold classic fusion that I told you about, all steel? That was kind of like a self-reward. That was like very costly watch that I offered to myself after the Champions League win in 2019. because I feel like that was a season where I had to like assure myself to the world of football. And I don't think you can do it in a better way than scoring a hat-trick in a Champions League final. So there was a lot of pressure going on in that season. You know, I had a lot of attention with my Ballon d'Or. I'm sure people were saying, like, how is she going to be able to perform and handle all that at the same time? But I feel like I did. And so that was a great piece. But I would also say the Sapphire, because it was kind of like coming back from injury. Gifts. Been very lucky to get that watch. So thank you, Hublot, again, because it was a very limited edition. So I would mention those two, yeah.
I think if you're listening, wondering, what are we talking about the Sapphire watch for? The hard thing to do with Sapphire is to manufacture this material, because it's very difficult to fashion into links for a bracelet. It's very difficult to fashion into cases. It's this miraculous material that's super tough and scratch-proof, and obviously fully transparent. So it's really it's the ultimate way to show a watch. And I mean, one of the great mysteries of our time is, how is it that we're still wearing this 17th century technology on our bodies in a time when nothing else has survived digital progress? Like, do you ever look at it and just go, hang on a second, this is like the same movement that was in a watch in the 17th century. Why is it still here? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Because it's a weird one.
It's almost art in my eyes. And I think, honestly, when I got the opportunity to visit the Hublot factory and seeing the details that are being done, how many hours that are put into putting some small pieces together, it's incredible and it's very impressive. And I just think it's a culture thing. It's a tradition as well that's being passed on to future generations. And it really just has to stay that way, because you can compare it to hundreds and hundreds of years ago and it still has the same functioning, same ability. And it should stay that way, because in the end, it's tradition and art. And
for me, honestly, this thing is dead at least half the time, and it gives me so much frustration.
He was showing his phone, guys.
Yeah, I was just holding up my phone saying, these devices, I can't deal with a smartwatch.
Devices.
I don't want these devices. I want something that powers itself just from my body's motion. And
Agreed.
That's a very simple and dumb reason why I love watches. But you're right, there's a nostalgia to it. There's a sense that this is going to be something that will stand the test of time. So can you are you going to donate your iPhone 14 to your child? By the time they get there, there'll be an iPhone 36. It will be no use. So
totally agree.
The listeners don't need any convincing.
It's a good rant.
It is Continue. A good rant. That's my rant. That's my rant about watches. No, please don't encourage me. I will keep going. But Ada, look, it's been so wonderful speaking to you. The reason I started this interview talking about my daughters is that when there was that penalty shootout, I'm trying to remember who were we playing, Ada. It was the Matildas and it was the most stressful shootout I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, you were playing France.
We're playing France.
Yeah.
We were playing France, and it went so deep. It was the tension just kept.
I think it was 22 penalties or something, at least.
I think it was like a 12-11 or something where it ended. It took me a whole day for my cortisol levels to return to normal. But I was on a train. My dad's a steam train freak, so we were out in the country in England, and I was on this patchy reception watching it on my phone. And I just was not having it. I wasn't having it. No one was talking to me. But I felt like, and my daughters in that moment were totally in it with me. And then since then, they've learned about you and they've learned about these great sports people. So I do want to finish by saying thank you for being a great mentor and an idol to my daughters and to many, many girls. To Darren, our engineer, wanted to jump in and get a photo as well. Darren. Please, but no, it's you are truly a powerful person for that reason, and I really want this trajectory to continue. The World Cup was an epic moment, and I'm sorry that your run ended a little short this time. But do you find that you still have so much to do, and that you're not even going to consider the goals that could be beyond football, or do you feel that you're kind of nice and philosophical about that. It doesn't seem to me like nice and philosophical is really you. I feel like you're...
I think I gave you a little impression here where I'm heading. No, but I do got to say that I'm incredibly moved getting all these stories about people having young daughters growing up, actually being inspired by us. That's maybe the biggest compliment I get when I play. And I just want to leave a message to all the parents out there as well, getting obviously young boys as well, because I don't want to close them out of this. But I mean, taking care of your kids, and especially your young daughters, actually telling them from day one that they can achieve whatever they want to do with some very high self-belief. I really hope I get girls to that someday, so I can teach them this message, because it's powerful. And I think parents have such an important role in that. Society is going to challenge them, but parents are always going to be rock solid, telling you that, no, you do your own thing. So tell your girls hi already. And
I will.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they're in the next Ballon d'Or.
Well, it would have started here. Now, the last thing I need to resolve before we go, we have some important business. I need to choose a football team.
Ooh, well,
I don't have one
my
yet.
contract is up next summer, so whatever team I'm in the next summer, I would recommend you.
So you just text
14.
me when you've decided. I'll choose that one.
I will.
And I don't even have one for the men's in the Premier League or anything. So if you've got any recommendations,
well, don't pick Lyon men's, because they're being bottom at the League One at the moment. So pick another team.
Okay, that's good. I've been given at least one not to go for. But thank you again, Ada, so much. It's been an absolute joy, and I really think this is going to be an inspirational thing to listen to for lots of people. So thanks for bearing with us, and thanks for being on Time+Tide's podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, hands up. Who's an Ada Hegerberg fan now? I know that my hand is up, and I know that my audio engineer Darren's hand is up, because as soon as the interview was over, he suddenly appeared. His camera went on Zoom, and he cheekily and very humbly asked if he could have a selfie with Ada, because he's such a big fan. And then the two of them went on to have a very deep and detailed discussion about injuries in women's sport and how there's an increasing number of torn ACLs and torn PCLs. Very detailed, kind of fascinating, but also proof that I am not a big football fan. I have a lot to learn. Thanks for listening, watchers, and it's a different kind of show, isn't it? It's not your typical watch podcast. It really comes at watches from different angles, and listening to Ada talk about watches and how deeply and emotionally she is attached to her watches proves to me once again that there are just so many ways to love these little machines with heartbeats that we wear on our wrists. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Darren, for holding fire until the end of the interview. And thank you, Ada Hegerberg, for being a delightful guest. Also, of course, the Hublot team, Nevena and Annabelle, thank you for making that interview happen. Darren, well played making this interview sound so beautiful. See you all on the next one.